So I think we start with the sound of sirens and the flashing of lights. A camera kind of sweeping over the Lost Crown Saloon. I think there's probably like a plume of smoke, right, billowing out the kind of cratered out hole in the side that Rhodes made his escape through. And we can see, the armors and the vehicles of the Coronet Civil Security, the police force of Coronatus, arriving to investigate what's been happening at the casino. I think we follow our camera as it moves through the streets into an abandoned, boarded up warehouse. And the interior of that warehouse, I think there's like a freight elevator, rusty with age, that should not be in use, but is descending. And we follow that down into the tunnels beneath the city, trace our way through the dimly lit underground until we arrive once more at the Lowtower. I don't know how this shakes out timing-wise, but I think we can come back in, as Rhodes is arriving back in the red shift. I imagine maybe the last to arrive, since you two both took slightly more portable, more convenient, quicker forms of transportation. But it is the squad arriving back at the Lowtower, kind of directly in the aftermath of the I don't know what you would call it, the fiasco, the crisis at the Lost Crown Saloon, and the encounter with Hyacinth Corren, the Looking Glass Knight, Rhodes' rival.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I don't imagine Rhodes came right back. It's maybe been 6 hours where he's just kind of been MIA, I don't know, 6 and 12, somewhere in there. And I think Rhodes probably went on the edge of town, probably did some steely, staring at the horizon kind of thing, reflecting heavily before he returns. But I think coming into Lowtower, I don't know where everybody's at, but my thought is, maybe it's quieter here than it has been, but I've got to get some care essentially. So I'm checking myself into the infirmary.
Yeah, I guess where are Carta and Dez when you arrive back?
I guess Carta is still kind of he's both tinkering and trying to look cool, playing with the motorcycle that he rode away, and is just thinking about how, he's kind of daydreaming of being the bad boy who's riding this around. But when he sees Rose come in and goes what the hell, man? We thought we got you out of there. Where the hell were you?
I don't think he says anything.
You just... All right. Well, glad you're all right. Welcome back.
Dez says yeah, who the hell was this guy? Okay, let me get one more take on that. I kind of bit my tongue on that one. Who was that guy? What's going on here?
I think I don't know. I'm imagining whatever. Rhodes is probably still patched up. Just checking my sheet. I'm currently bleeding, scratched, and enervated. So I'm imagining is just sort of, you could probably follow the dripping trail of hemolymph as it crosses the Lowtower. But I think, I don't know, what are you following him in there? I'm imagining Rhodes is probably sort of slotting in some kind of IV or the equivalent of an IV into an arm and sidling into something like a medical bed. I don't know who's around.
What's the closest thing to bringing Rhodes a glass of water?
I mean, water probably. I don't really know. I don't know. Gas. He has to drink gas.
Okay, sure. Do you know what? Whatever it is, I bring you over a glass of that and a shot of something strong.
Nice.
That's just there for you on the table. Well, I'm glad you're all right. I think you're going to need both of these.
I owe you boys an explanation.
Do we need to call someone?
No, we don't need to call anyone. It's not my first time. And I think maybe swinging a leg up on the table downs the shot. I'm sure you've heard the stories, but maybe you haven't. I lose track of time. You're both young, not green, but young. And I am not. I haven't talked a lot about my past, in part because Imber's a young world. It's no stranger to conflict, but has been spared the carnage of total war on a planetary scale. I hail from a planet, a world that no longer is. At least not in the way it was. Feldspar, my homeworld.
I'm sorry, what does this guy have to do with Feldspar, and what does Feldspar have to do with this guy? I don't see the connection here.
Yeah, I ought to explain that. I haven't been real forthcoming with my past. I admit that. And frankly, we've got bigger fish to fry. But
I mean, that guy seems like a pretty big fucking fish. What? I don't even know what I saw. I don't know. What was that?
He just appeared from out of nowhere. People don't do that?
I'm sorry to say I don't have the answers to that. But
Is this going to affect what what we have going on here? Like, what does this mean for Black Star?
of course,
How many more of them are there?
I don't think you'd like the answer to that. Hyacinth and I go way back. I've known Hyacinth for longer than both of you have been alive. Been many things in my lifetime. Not just a soldier or a shepherd or an outlaw, but in a lifetime before that, a farmer, a slave, a student, even a friend once. And more importantly, in the eyes of the Concordat, a thief, a coward, a sacrilege of sorts. Feldspar, my homeworld, was something like a walled garden. It was beautiful. If you spend enough time on Imber, it might seem something like a paradise. High peaks piercing the alpine canopies, streams of crystal blue water coursing down their cascades. Life was abundant, trees full of song. Life abundant, not in the way that you know, but inorganic, synthetic, as you might say. My kin seemed to spring from the ground itself. Though we weren't the first on Feldspar, we walked in the footsteps and the ruins of our forebears. Their monoliths as clear as the mountain air, and a constant reminder, as clear as that beacon over us right now in Coronatus, that we were only inheritors.
Sounds like a different dimension than Imber. Couldn't imagine anything further away from here.
This sector of space is full of worlds you probably couldn't imagine. But there weren't, it wasn't all good. You know, for an age, Feldspar flourished. Life, like my own, found footing until the Concordat came. On an expeditionary fleet long ago, they landed and found something here that we were scarcely aware of. As it happens, that same natural metallurgy that breathed life into my own chassis was the same alloy that grants them command over the fundament itself. And they seized hold of that opportunity.
You're talking about orichalcum.
Of course. We never knew the word orichalcum. We never knew its worth. We never knew what it meant to something as vast and sprawling as the Concordat.
Well, from what I know, Feldspar's not there anymore.
That's true.
So while Ember might not be, a walled garden of paradise, how long until they do that here anyway? How much longer until hundreds of these magician guys who appear out of nowhere come and just wipe us all out?
You've seen what the Concordat's capable of. Their ability to master the fundament, control it, bend it to their will is beyond the scale of this conflict here. And Hyacinth, unfortunately, has been on the leading edge of the Concordat's expansion.
Howdy, and welcome to Risky Standard, an actual play podcast featuring a rowdy group of best friends playing tabletop role-playing games together. I'm your host and GM, Mitch Broesder. You can find me on Twitter at MagnesiumB. You can find the show over on Twitter at Standard Risky. And you can also find us over on our Discord, where we like to chat about the show, share some behind-the-scenes photos and stuff. And links to that is in our show notes. With me today, I've got Peter Loftus.
Me and only me. I'm Pete. We're playing a very special episode today. You can find me on Twitter at chip_enjoyer.
That's right, risk takers. We are doing something a little bit different today. I'm trying it. I don't know. Something.
Risk takers, I like. That's fun.
It is just me and Pete here today. We are doing something a little different. Today, Pete and I are going to take a departure from our usual game of Beam Saber by Austin Ramsey, play a one-off session of another game to tell the story of Rhodes Rampart and his rival, the Concordat Knight, known as Hyacinth Corren. And so like I said, today we are not playing Beam Saber. Instead, today we will be playing a game called Last Shooting by Grant, which you can find over on Grant's itch.io page, which we'll also be linking to in today's show notes. Find Grant over on Twitter at Gen Ironicus. Grant's on a number of podcasts and other great projects, including the actual play show 6 Feet Under. So I think we can kind of just dive right back into what this game is, explain how we're going to use it to tell the story. And to do that, I think I can let the game explain itself first, because it's got a pretty nice and succinct summary. So, an introduction to Last Shooting, what this book does. Last Shooting is a role-playing game where two people play out the story of two mech pilots leading up to and including their final duel in a space war. You will play out 3 scenes by wagering items on your data file in order to determine the outcome. The first 2 scenes will define your pilots, their machines, and the war around them. The final scene will destroy many of the things you defined as one pilot defeats the other. You may be able to use this game to tell different stories that follow the same theme and structure, but the rules assume you are playing a pair of people in control of large mechanical bodies built for warfare, clashing against a background of stars, which we very much are today. And so, as it says there, the kind of primary mechanic of Last Shooting is a sort of bidding game. Peter and I both have what the game calls data files, which is kind of like a character sheet, like a little 1-page character sheet that has a lot of kind of empty prompts on it with blank spaces next to them. It has things, under mechanical resources like your mech's tactical specialty, its alternate mode, its utility equipment, its signature weapon or unique appearance. And it also includes personal resources, things like your rank, your squad mates, your signature maneuver, your catchphrase. And as we play the game, we sort of make bids by defining these empty prompts and then later destroying those same details that we've defined in an auction to decide who gets narrative control of each scene. So the game kind of has like a pretty defined structure that we're going to be following along here. We'll have an opening where we kind of talk about the setting of our conflict. Of course, since we're playing in an existing setting, some of this has already been done for us, but the opening is where we kind of set up the scenario that we're playing out, the stakes of it, and exactly what's going on. And then from there, we move through 3 scenes that feature kind of notable conflicts between these 2 characters. Their first duel, their first reunion, and then their final duel in scene 3. Although I guess in our case, it's kind of final duel 4 now, and up until this moment in the world. And then we tie that all off with sort of an epilogue or an ending where we get an image of how these 2 characters have been changed by their intertwined lives and this conflict that has shaped them. So yeah, I think we can discuss exactly how this sort of bidding and auctioning works once we get into the first scene, but maybe we can crack into the opening first and kind of start there and work our way forwards. Last Shooting is a pretty structurally defined game. It kind of asks us to do these things in order and kind of answer certain questions to prompt us to think about what's going on, who these characters are, and what their motivations are. So let's move to the opening if you're ready, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's do it. Should I read the brief? You want me to?
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, the opening is your chance to set the groundwork for your session of Last Shooting. This is your time to consider tone, style, and all things that set one mecha story apart from one another. So on the opening, each player begins the game with a blank data file. We've got that. And then we must answer the following questions. What is this war about, and what is your motive in this war?
In the game, it comes with some sort of defined dichotomies of what this war is about, right? It's got 6 of them listed here. We can kind of talk through some of these and see if one fits naturally or if we need to come up with our own. It says, together, choose one pair of opposed goals or pick one randomly or make up your own. And these are the stated goals of the factions in your war. They may not be entirely honest in your story, but they are how they publicly describe their motivations. So let's just run down this list. And then we can also kind of talk about, we should talk about, what do we mean by factions here? But, let's run through these and then we can kind of zoom out and talk a little bit about who the factions are and what we're representing here. But the 6 listed, what is this war about? A struggle for independence versus upholding safety and stability. A necessary invasion versus the defense of our homeland.
Mm-hmm.
To reawaken past glory versus to preserve the bounty of the present. 4, to propel humanity into the future versus to preserve tradition. And 5 is to build a place for the dispossessed versus to maintain the rule of law. And 6 here, a fun one. The war has caused a rift in our faction. Now we fight amongst ourselves.
A couple of those kind of fit.
Yeah, so I think we should talk about, we have gotten a little bit of the history of Hyacinth and Rhodes together already. We know, that they were both from this sort of machine world of Feldspar, that was colonized, taken over by the Concordat. So I think obviously here, one of our factions, of course, is the Concordat.
The Concordat, just to remind us here, are a powerful and ancient theocratic monarchy whose faith is structured around an endless crusade to find their divine builder out amongst the stars.
I think it's going to be a little tricky because the scale of the conflict that we're talking about, I think, stretches out over a greater number of years than the game maybe normally is accommodating or thinking about, right?
War also is a little more loosely determined here than...
Yeah, but I think we're talking about the Ring versus the Concordat at its broadest scale still here, right? That's where we know that Rhodes is going to spend a lot of his time during the years that he is fighting Hyacinth.
The Ring, of course, are the faction of interstellar revolutionaries that our squad in the main game belongs to, whose philosophies of radical egalitarianism and permanent insurrection make them dire enemies of imperial forces like the Concordat.
Yeah, and I guess maybe it's worth restating for a listening audience that Rhodes and Hyacinth are rivals, both synthetic, who found themselves on opposing sides of a battlefield across 2 centuries or so, as the Concordat's expansionary fleet has continued to, reach further and further across this sector of space. So I guess, this comes from their homeworld, right? This conflict starts on Feldspar. To me, there's a bunch of these that are really close.
Yeah.
To reawaken past glory versus preserve the bounty of the present.
I will say that's the one that jumped out to me first. I think this ties into thinking about also, like you said, this is not war in exactly the way that the game is made thinking about of 2 state powers, slugging it out over control of a singular territory, right? A lot of this conflict is, the Ring inciting or supporting rebellious activities across multiple fronts, or running these kind of guerrilla attacks. But I think, if we think about what they are factionally about, that, number 3 here, to reawaken past glory, are preserving the bounty of the present. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Well, and that is explicitly reawakening past glory is kind of explicitly the Concordat's thing, right? It's
Yeah, big picture, hopefully we've got it across if you're listening this long, but if not, restating the fundamental motivations of the Concordat. They are a theocratic monarchy who believe that a very long time ago, a sort of a deity existed that they think of as the Builder, who built up, kind of the first civilization, the remnants of which are still scattered across the galaxy, these kind of first era artifacts. And at some point, the Builder left. The Builder dipped and is gone, but they think he is still out there, and their primary motivation is scouring the galaxy for clues or technology that will bridge the gap between them and the Builder again, that will find the path back to where the Builder now resides, to kind of usher in a second age of paradise.
To find the spigot from which God meters out his grace and smash it open.
Yes, precisely. Some of these other ones also have echoes of this conflict, though, right? I think to build a place for the dispossessed versus to maintain the rule of law, is another... Mm-hmm. Highlights some key philosophical differences between the Concordats, this theocratic monarchical structure, right? The Concordat have a supreme emperor, a hierophant. They have this kind of feudalistic aristocratic governmental structure.
And I suppose the flip side to that, preserving the bounty of the present, is the one that's not quite 1-to-1 for me. But in one element of what's going on here is an external force seeking to change this planet to its own ends. Mm-hmm. I don't know that the Ring is necessarily focused on the bounty of the present, but I think there's something there too, preserving an alternative, right? Or resisting hegemony.
Yeah, I mean, I think something we have talked about a little bit. It's something I'd love to get on screen more as we, maybe we haven't been in a place of the Ring's power really during the course of this game yet. But in my mind, and, in the conception of a lot of this stuff, I think a lot about the writings of Murray Bookchin and other kind of eco-socialist works. I think there's a lot of in my mind, a lot of the philosophy of the Ring echoes this kind of desire to live in harmony with the natural world, or to create a way of living that is sustainable and that can that doesn't, destroy the things around it to like create
Mhm.
progress, right? This is also kind of like part of what's happening with the conflict on Imber, right? Is like a resistance to mining practices that give the opportunity for advanced technologies but destroy the planet of Imber in the process. This is the one that like speaks to me the most out of all of these.
Yep, I think I'm cool with that. I like to reawaken past glory versus preserving the bounty of the present.
And so we have this nice like Google sheet that
I'm pretty sure it's linked in the actual playbook. So if you
it
pick
is.
it up
It is by Julianne Hardstone. Is the person who made this play sheet, and it is genuinely. It's a perfect like little sheet that like auto like crosses out or highlights things as you fill them in. Super useful for running this game. Very convenient. So big shout out to that person.
nice work.
So somewhere on this sheet, I think we write, "What is this war about?"
I just put it in the middle.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. So what is this war about? It is about the Concordat's drive to reawaken past glory versus the Ring's drive to preserve the bounty of the present. And then the game goes on to ask us, what is your motive in this war? Why do you keep getting in the robot? Choose one for yourself, or pick one randomly, or make one up on your own. And write this motive along with your answer to its question on your data file. And so they have like 10 options here. I don't necessarily read all of these, but we can kind of talk about them a little bit. They ask, what is your motivation? And they are things like a career. When the question here is, what makes a good soldier? Or, conquest. How will humanity benefit under your leadership? Constructed. How did they make you into a living war machine? Vengeance. What did you lose, and who will you kill for it? So kind of like big picture motivational stuff. So why don't we?
Yeah.
If one of these jumps out to you immediately for Rhodes, I think we should also maybe we hadn't said this. I will be taking on the role of Hyacinth Corren tonight, presumably. We can flip it.
There's a thought.
Yeah. That's a fun alternate universe where we play the game that way.
Yeah. Okay. TBD on that.
Yeah.
Stay tuned, listeners at home. I think for me, where we pick up and join this, the context here, right, is like that on Feldspar, the Concordat has unearthed ancient war machines. Something from the first era, long buried, these kind of like what we would recognize as armors or frames, but from an era past with capability, that we're barely aware of in the modern era here. So I think along with that, when the Concordat shows up on Feldspar, I'm imagining that the kind of native like Feldspari are kind of like seduced by this idea of being part of something bigger, and they know where you came from, right? Because it's like just to restate, like Rhodes is synthetic. It's from a planet where synthetic life is like abundant. I think they've kind of been maybe sort of unaware, or just like any mystery of creation, like don't really know where they come from. And I think when the Concordat shows up, they like inform the Feldspari that they're actually like built for a purpose, and that purpose is wielding these like incredible feats of like reliquary technology. So I kind of am drawn towards like the constructed thing because they've almost like whether it's true or not, have like instilled in like Feldspar local populations that their purpose is this. Like they have a preternatural ability to connect with these things.
Yep. I think that everything you just said makes a lot of sense. Especially, I think you had mentioned earlier, like Feldspar being dotted with these relics and remnants of the first era, kind of like alongside like where these Feldspar have like grown and lived. And I think that kind of is maybe also informing from a different angle where Hyacinth is going to take this. I think I'm going to take one from this list as well, which is a zealotry. Question it asks is, how do you take your faction's ideology even farther? So it asks us, to write down the motive along with our answer to its question on our data file. How do I take my faction's ideology even further? And it's something like I will be the key that unlocks the door to the builder. I think, the thing that we'll start to see about Hyacinth, I think the the kind of like primary motivation for him is this sense that like, not only are the people of Feldspar connected to this ancient past, but like they are there specifically to kind of fulfill this mission that is like the Concordat's ultimate mission. So I think that's mine. Yeah.
This is zealotry versus constructed. Okay, tracking. Next, we show our credentials. You come up with the basics for your pilots, the factions, and their mechs. These are the pilots' credentials located in the data file. Pilots may choose to start the game on the same side, but they'll be fighting against one another from the start. That's most likely us.
Yeah.
So maybe we should kind of just run through some of the credentials.
Yeah, I do like. There's a line here I just want to read because I like this. The game says nothing about your mech, but this bare outline is set in stone until you begin using your bids to define it. For now, the name is just something you used to refer to that beast of possibility. So yeah, why don't we cover what these are, and then we can go through and kind of give our answers to them.
Beast of possibility also whips. That's a great phrase.
Yeah, it's a great mech name also.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So the credentials are just like running down the list. They are kind of like exactly what you'd expect. It's the name of the pilot, their call sign, their age and gender, their faction, their mech, and then also like production run here is one of the categories. And then it also asks for like an emblem or a pilot ID, which is like either a picture or a text description, which I think we'll get plenty of what these characters look like as we go on. You want to take like just a minute here to fill these up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So we've taken a second here to fill in our credentials. Should we kind of run through them?
Yeah, we can just like cover them really quickly.
Why don't you go first?
I'm kind of leaning into the thing the game said about the beast of possibility here, right? Some of the things I'm filling out here are kind of forward looking. They are omens of what will come over the course of this story. But I am playing as Hyacinth Corren, call sign the Looking Glass Knight. Although I think he will not be known by that yet at the start of this little story that we're telling. Gender male, pronouns he, him. Faction here, I think we already established here, but the Concordat, right? Hyacinth, as this story unfolds, finds himself firmly fighting on the side of the Concordat, the ancient interstellar theocracy. And the mech that he will become known for piloting is the Weight of Ascension. And its production run is that it is a refrain unit. And age here, I've put a 25, which is, maybe hard to say whether that's like an actual hard physical age, but I think it is kind of like the maturity level that this character is at when we start this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
As synthetics, I think maybe there's not like a direct, symmetry and like that we would have for like biological age. But I think, that's the kind of like a emotional kind of mental age that we're talking about.
They're like borderline child soldiers.
Yeah, right. Just past, depending on how you want to think about it. And depending on how long they've been in the program for, started that way for sure. And so, yeah, so that is Hyacinth Corren.
Cool. I'm playing, of course, as Rhodes, Rampart. I think probably just going by Rhodes at this point. Call sign will be known under Relic in time. I think that probably hasn't quite emerged yet, but I'll stick with it for now. I think Rhodes is like a year younger, just to make it interesting. I think I'm going to say about 24. Uses he, him pronouns, faction being, of course, associated in due time with the ring. The mech is, of course, the Redshift. It's production run. I think at this point, it is not in production. This is like, I've just designated as RF0, which is just a recovered frame. So I think it's production. It's just, we'll just stick with like RF0. Oh, wait, isn't that Gundam though, too?
Is it? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, the RF series is like the mobile suit, like infantry, but that's fine. We'll stick with
fine.
Like RF0 is cool.
Yeah, and so that is, our credentials. These are the basics about our pilots, and it's, like pretty bare bones because a lot of the other kind of important details about these characters are things that we are going to define in bids during the next three kind of segments of this game. We have kind of a rough sense of who they are. We kind of have a rough sense of where we're starting, and so I think we can kind of move from here into scene one, which is the next portion of the game. So scene one, you are a pair of pilots in a space war.
Wait, right there. When we're buried next to each other, I think both of our tombstones should say that.
It's not a bad one. You are a pair of pilots in a space war. History will say the course of the war was shaped by your duel. But from where you're sitting today, that probably sounds ridiculous. Answer the background questions for your pilot, then set the scene together. Then follow the special instructions for the scene one auction. So we should talk maybe I think we have some idea of where this first scene takes place, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about this as maybe being. I guess maybe we're jumping ahead here a little bit in terms of setting the scene before we answer our background questions.
But it'll be relevant, I think.
Yeah, but I think that we talked about setting this first scene as like an encounter, maybe during like a training exercise during this kind of first period when Hyacinth and Rhodes are both kind of members of this experimental war college on Feldspar, being utilized to experiment with some of these uncovered relics from beneath Feldspar's surface, which maybe does or does not include in this scene the redshift itself. We can answer that as we start to set the scene. But so we're kind of starting. This first duel is like at the very beginning of both of these characters' careers, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I think so. First question is, how long have you been a pilot? And I think at this point in the story, I think this program has probably gone on for like maybe about a year. I'm imagining maybe this first scene is like a kind of test of like combat capability. I'm going to say maybe like 2 years of this program, like developing, like the interface and the control piece and the like tactical capability of these machines.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that does answer the question for both of us in some way. Sorry, if we're both part of this program, right? It's been like a year and a half, 2 years is how long we've been a pilot, give or take. The second question here is: have the two of you met on the battlefield before?
Maybe not explicitly. I think like we probably both have some awareness of each other's capability and have been kind of like, I think at this point more like collaborators, right? Like, or
we're training together. We're colleagues. We're
colleagues. Yeah.
Yeah. We're in the
squad mates, probably.
Yeah, squad mates. Yeah, but we have not. Ooh, can I pitch something?
Yeah, I was just having some wheels turn.
What if this is like the redshift has been uncovered recently, and this is like a kind of not graduation exercise, but it's kind of like a test to see which of these pilots is most suited for piloting this newly discovered experimental frame, right? Like it's kind of like the professors of the war college are like, running the members of this program through, whether it's a tournament or it's just kind of like one-on-one duels or something, but like we're being pitted against each other to see who has the most potential to pilot this kind of like very exciting new discovery. Is that?
Yeah, it's like who really has top marks.
Yeah.
So we've put a lot of this theory into practice, and okay, I like that.
So it's like a live fire exercise. It's like to see which of these pilots is actually the one who's going to get to the redshift has just been discovered. It's this the most advanced or most interesting frame that has been pulled up out of the earth so far. So yeah, the final question here from background is: how do you feel about your faction? Who knows it? I guess I don't know who you want to answer. Like, which faction you want to answer that question about in this case, Pete? I think either one kind of is an interesting.
Well, I guess here I'll go first, and then let me know what you think of this. But my kind of read on this is that both answers to this question are talking about the Concordat, right? Like, because we're very much like in a Concordat program. So
yeah.
How does Rhodes feel about the faction? And who knows it? I think that over the last like year or two, as this kind of like capacity has been coached out of, kind of like some fellows in the program, this kind of changed in tone, right? Like from where we kind of began, which was there's these incredible, miraculous things buried under the soil in Feldspar. The Feldspari have like some kind of connection to them that's mysterious. The idea that the Concordat can like unlock that was of course very enticing, but I think that the program has kind of grown increasingly militaristic over the last like 6 months to a year, as now we're in a live fire training session, right? So like we're actually seeing these, and I even kind of think like over the last 6 months, maybe even like targets are stock or I don't know, like recovered like opponent mechs. I don't know what like the standard ring mech is, but I think like we're doing like live fire training exercises on what are very clearly targets of another faction now.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I think that Rhodes has a growing reticence about like the direction this is heading, because it has changed from uncovering some kind of truth about the metaphysical nature of like who we are to being a weapon in the hands of a like conquistador.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that Rhodes is becoming more hesitant of this, but like is still kind of in the program and like, can feel those strains. Who knows it? I mean, I bet Hyacinth knows it, and I bet like some of the other cadets are aware, but I don't think this is something that like Rhodes is like waving like a flag.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's cool. That's interesting. I like that detail about like the targets. That's a good note. How does Hyacinth feel about the Concordat at this point? I think that Hyacinth feels spiritually indebted. I think if we could move our camera to the times before this, right, to Feldspar before the arrival of the Concordat on the planet, we would see Hyacinth as the kind of person who spent most of his time, exploring these first era ruins on the surface and kind of like looking to the sky at night, maybe like perched on the kind of like ruined shelf of some old tower or something, like looking up and kind of trying to, deeply like existentially hungry for understanding or meaning. And I think, Hyacinth has taken the gospel at like full truth, full face, like of course these things were remnants of the first era of, that they were the works of the builder, and that we are, we are deeply special and important, and we were put on this place to do something deeply special and important. And I think that this has given him a sense of purpose that he has always lacked in life. And so he feels, he's becoming further indoctrinated in the faith of the Concordat, and he's also, like I said, indebted is like a word I like that he feels like he owes something to these people who have revealed this truth to him.
Yeah, I also kind of like the difference in background that like Hyacinth was more of an academic explorer, right? Like this was a kind of like, imperative of like seeking truth. And I think Rhodes is probably more raw talent that just got swept up into this. Like, I don't think Rhodes has as concrete of like a ideological purpose.
I think we haven't talked about it as much, but I imagine like the members of this program were, targeted in part because of their like ability or something about them that seemed to make them suited towards this thing.
Right.
But the final note on this question, who knows it? I think that the upper brass at the War College know it, right? Hyacinth's enthusiasm has been noted. I
Definitely.
think if not like the teacher's pet, certainly has kind of started to gather that reputation a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, of course.
Yeah. And so then we're kind of jumping back again here, or jumping forward. It asks us to set the scene. Scene 1 establishes the first significant encounter between your two pilots. Feel free to use one of these suggestions to set the scene for your first encounter, or come up with your own. And they say a sudden evacuation, an ambush convoy, encountering a scouting party. But I think we've got, we can fill in some details here, but I think, right, the broad strokes of it is that this is like a live fire training exercise conducted within the War College on Feldspar, maybe some natural area that has been kind of converted into like a shooting ground.
Yeah, and I mean, to go like one step further, I'm imagining this as kind of like, it's like an exam, right? So I'm imagining, this is too corny, but like in my head is like, it's like a Mortal Kombat stage where like the redshift is like posed in the background. Right.
The prize we're fighting for is like,
yeah, exactly.
Like
this is like a duel, right? Like this is like a German like War College duel.
Yeah.
I bet there's a proctor there, like someone who's kind of like watching over,
like a
probably
floating platform over the battlefield, right? Like
yes,
like with like like not just one, but like there's like definitely a proctor, and then I'm imagining like rows of computers on this platform with people who are like just studying like the input, the outputs of like these pilots, and like compiling data, right? Like we're
what Gundam calls it, battlefield telemetry data.
Yeah.
We have to collect the like battlefield capability data. That, and I'm also going to say like on this kind of like platform overlooking, there's probably kind of like representatives of these different orders within the Concordat who are like scouting, right? Like of,
Oh yeah,
looking
yeah,
at talent, right? Like, you have the Order of the Oculi, like the order of a couple of other things here.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Like this is probably a bit of a ceremonial thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if we've said this out loud or not. I imagine that like the force that has arrived on Feldspar is probably like another expeditionary legion, like the same kind of formation that has arrived on Imber all these centuries later, right? Like this is kind of like a standard way of spreading and expanding that the Concordat does.
It's a playbook that works.
Yeah.
How long do you think the Concordat has been on Feldspar at like this moment?
At this moment, only a few years, right? Maybe a few. Like if we're saying that the War College program has been going for like 2 years, let's say 5 years, right?
Okay, cool.
Like recently enough that it's not a fact of life yet, right? Like it's still like new to everyone here, but long enough that they've established like forces on the planet. That this program is now. And maybe this is another reason that we're talking about, there being like kind of people here to watch this. This is, maybe this particular program, like its first kind of like coming to fruition in a way, right? Like it's like, hey, here's evidence that the thing we've been doing for the past 5 years has worked. Come view like the soldiers we've been training to pilot these special machines.
I just wrote this on the sheet, but maybe this is like Right of the Wielder.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Like this is a probably something that happens fairly often, right? Like in the like Concordat like War College system is, like you have people test for this like honorific pilot duty.
Absolutely, because I think we've seen a little bit. I don't know if we've had the chance yet to get it as on screen as much yet, but whereas like the Commonwealth or the Ring, manufacture armors. The Concordat does this also, right? It does like have manufactories, but there are also I think like a lot of armors in the Concordat's arsenal that are
Exotics?
Exotics. They're like singular relics. They're singular machines that are passed down from kind of one wielder to another. They have like inherited titles. And so it's not. I think like this idea of like a right of a wielder is probably a fairly common one. Yeah, like you said. Because there are often machines that you don't get another one of these, right? There is just, one undying flame, and whoever pilots that, they're piloting that,
You're canonized.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Saints is a great way to think about this. I think, call back to earlier this season, the Comprehension of Grace is one of these kinds of machines, right? There's not another Comprehension of Grace waiting to come out if that one gets destroyed. You've got the one weird, like, lightning mech. Cool. The person who gets to use that, like, right, they get a title, right? They get a cool name.
Of course, there's only one evocator.
Yeah.
That whips. That's cool. Okay.
So this is the right of the wielder. That's pretty good. And so with all of that set up, we kind of move on to the auction. So I'm going to talk. Maybe I'll kind of like run through here really quick what this looks like mechanically, and then we can actually do the thing. So, talking about the auction, I'm going to read from the book again here a little bit, because I think the book does a pretty good job of explaining itself. The structure of Last Shooting is fairly rigid. Most of what makes each showdown unique comes after the scene is set, but before it is played out. That step is the auction. Building from the prompts provided, the players set the scene, then the auction begins. It proceeds in 3 steps. Both players buy in. Players decide whether or not to raise during the ante. Then once all bids are settled, it's time to call it. And when we call it, we determine who wins the scene. And then that winner kind of gets narrative control over how the scene actually plays out. And after playing out a scene, the winning bidder gets to claim a reward for their trouble. And so the way this bidding works, right? Your bids will come from the resources listed on your data file. When you begin, that data file will look empty. The items on it will be defined and later destroyed when they are bid. Something cannot be placed as a bid without either defining it or destroying it. And so, the game tells us, right, that the biddable resources on our data file are everything below the words resources. And it gives us an example here, right? So, for instance, if a player bids their signature weapon in the first scene, they may define it as a high-yield bazooka fed by a revolver drum. Later, if they choose to bid it again, they know it will be destroyed. Whether it's left as an exploding trap or melted by their opponent or meets some other fate depends on how the scene plays out. But to bid a resource that is already defined is to guarantee it will be destroyed. No exceptions. And so yeah, the first step of the auction is to buy in. And so to buy in, both players must place a bid. To buy in, pick in one of the undefined items on your data file and write in what it is, defining it. When placing any bid, you must also announce what it is to the other player. And once you place a bid, you cannot take it back. A player may only bid something on their data file, so on and so forth. So yeah, do we want to do this? Do we want to buy in? We want to each make our first bid here?
Yeah. And this can be mechanical or personal, right?
Yes, it just has to be from one of the resource sections.
But if we're skirmishing here for control of the redshift, what are we piloting?
That's a great question. In my head, I'd kind of imagined I would be piloting some kind of like, the kind of like, the Zaku of the Concordat is the Caesura, this kind of humanoid knight mech. I'd kind of imagine I would be piloting like a Caesura type, but if you have like a different stock mech that Rhodes is in, you feel free to get out there, get wild with it.
What are other? We've only seen a handful of them on screen. What other like stock Concordat mech names?
There are Caesura units. There are, I don't think we've seen any other Concordat like kind of standard mechs on screen. So you have a lot of freedom to invent something. I have already stated that the mech that I will eventually be piloting, the Weight of Ascension, is a refrain unit.
So all of the Concordat mech designations are musical?
Musical or like poetry, yeah. Which obviously has a lot of overlap there, but yeah, they are all poetical terms. It's kind of my initial naming structure for Concordat mechs. Whereas Commonwealth models are all kind of simple weapons, or like medieval weapons. Or tools if they are non-combat mechs, I think.
Okay, so in that case, like if you've got the Caesura, I think for this skirmish anyway, I think we'll be piloting like a stanza.
Okay. Ooh, nice.
I think and the stanza is a fairly standard issue, like bipedal ground infantry, machine. Like I think looks kind of like an RGM in Gundam anyway, RGM whatever 72 is like the standard infantry unit. I think it's nothing crazy. So we bid one at a time.
So we will both buy in first. We both have to place a bid just to buy in, and then there will be an ante where we can each make another bid, and each scene has specific rules about how many times you may raise and other rules. For instance, we can't place any bids to destroy in scene one.
Okay, why don't you go first?
So for buying in initially, I am going to bid a mentor. I'm going to bid the Concordat Paladin Abaddon Spare, who is, I think, a human Concordat. Like I said, Paladin, a thaumaturge, a wielder of the fundament, this kind of a Concordat holy soldier, who I think is one of the proctors at the War College. And Abaddon Spare, I think, over the last 2 years has kind of taken a personal interest in Hyacinth's progression through the War College, has noticed Hyacinth's exceptional performance in the college, and I think has also taken a spiritual interest in Hyacinth, right? Has kind of been guiding Hyacinth on his spiritual journey, his induction into the Myriad Way, the faith of the Concordat. And so I think he is also probably one of the people on this floating platform watching the rite of wielding. The right of the wielder, happening. Yeah, he will be looking down over the course of this fight. And it's worth restating here. I think I said this earlier, but if I didn't, I just want to hit it one more time. That as a part of like making these bids and playing it out, each bid that we make during this auction must be present in the scene that we are going to play out afterwards, and it must be present exactly as it was defined. And in that same way, destroyed bids must be irrevocably destroyed. If we destroy something as a bid, it's gone, and it will be destroyed during that scene.
For the buy-in, I'm going to take a mobility system as a heavyweight force multiplier. And I think this is like actually, maybe this is more like unique customization. Because I'm imagining, this is a fairly standard unit that has been kind of modified to essentially like buff the stats on melee. So like I'm imagining that's like probably some sort of like thrust at the elbow that allows for like heavy hitting, probably some sort of like hip thrust system that allows you to like kind of like juke forward.
Okay, I like that. After both players have placed their initial bids, it is time for the ante. Now that you know your opponent's initial bid, you can attempt to bid more to try and win the auction, which will define more about your pilot along the way. Placing this new bid is called a raise, and each time you raise, it is added on top of your previous bid. Raises are made the same way as an initial bid, either by defining a new resource or destroying a defined one. And each scene will tell us how many times we can raise. And so, like I said, again, scene 1, we may each raise a maximum of 2 times. And it doesn't give us like a mode here for deciding who raises first.
I have one locked.
If you have one locked, go ahead, because I'm gonna.
I like this idea, so I'm kind of jamming on it. I'm also going to add a mentor because I like the idea that, like within the War College, you have a patron.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And I think that Rhodes has one as well. I'm writing Calathiel Ket as a mentor. I think that Calathiel is older, but is Feldspari, and I think like kind of got as an early adopter or something, like became more senior in this like War College. I think was maybe something like a captain of the guard before the Concordat arrived. Like as someone who's kind of been, like the constable or something, and has since kind of like ushered in this like sense of duty into Rhodes. I think that makes him like a Concordat, like justiciar or something.
And I think I will meet that raise with my own, which is a standard weapon loadout, which I think on this Caesura is a longsword and hand cannon. And so I think that the Caesura unit, this kind of, bipedal unit that is like deeply humanoid, down to this kind of like cabled musculature under armored plates, very much looks like a human being in a suit of armor in many ways. And I think its standard weapon loadout, right, is like an actual very large metal sword, and then like a similarly like hefty. I don't think it's necessarily an actual revolver, but it is, saying hand cannon here. I'm definitely thinking about like the weapon category from Destiny 2, right? This kind of enormous, close to mid-range, like slow firing but heavy hitting handheld weapon.
For me, it's like always the Samaritan in BPRD, like the gigantic revolver.
Mm-hmm.
Such a good name too, the Samaritan.
Yeah,
love
great.
it. I gotta watch that again.
I think that's back to you then, right? You have one more raise if you want. You can only raise the maximum 2 times.
Okay, well, I put the unique customization was a force multiplier. I think utility equipment, I'm going to choose... Is it a buckler? That's when you have a shield on your forearm?
Yeah.
I think like some kind of, like, I'll say duelist buckler, which is like, essentially just like kind of a wrist-mounted half shield. And I think it's also like, it's not metal here. I think it's some sort of like projection, like a kinetic repulsor kind of thing. Actually, that's a way cooler name than duelist buckler. I'm going to put kinetic repulsor.
Yeah. we get there eventually.
Okay. So that's twice up on the ante.
And I have one more raise permitted to me, which is... I'm gonna do a rank here, which is that I'm the class prefect.
Of course.
Yeah, I think that's my final raise here is that, Hyacinth is the class prefect. And, prefect here, I'm thinking of very much like, I think in like kind of like the like British boarding school tradition, right?
First boy,
yeah, right. I'm literally looking at like the dictionary definition, which is like in some schools, a senior student authorized to enforce discipline. And so, yeah, I think that for the last, 6 months of this program leading up to this big duel, this right of the wielder, this kind of like competition to see who will earn the right to pilot this advanced new machine. I have been, at the top of the class. I have been in this kind of put into this newfound position of authority over the other Feldspari members of this program, and I imagine that's probably also resulted in increased tensions between me and the other members of the program who are maybe not all as enthusiastic about everything as I am, maybe not as fervent in their beliefs about the Concordat as I am. But I think that is my final raise here.
Mm-hmm. Can I clarify something
Yeah.
with the rules because we're piloting war machines? Do I only have what's declared here in the ante, or like I guess by the rules, yes, right? Like to have an offensive weapon.
So here's let me read from the bidding to define section here. Placing bids to define them is how players turn their pilots into fully realized characters. Things that are written on the data file are certain, and things that are not are not. You may have an idea, but that idea cannot affect the duel until it is written down. Which means that up until the moment is written down, you are free to alter your idea to fit the situation perfectly. Which is a little bit of vagueness. So I think things can show up that are not on the data file. We have thrusters or whatever that enable movement, stuff like that. We assume we don't necessarily have to have on the data file, but when it comes to playing the scene, kind of describing how this thing goes out, the stuff the camera should focus on, I think, is what we've defined on our bids.
Okay, cool. I kind of like that also. Like maybe this is some kind of like ideological like stand. Is the right of the wielder a duel to the death?
That's a great question. I would assume
We can play it out.
Yeah, I would think not. But there are maybe like, this is like
until you yield kind of thing.
Yeah, or like, I could even see this being that kind of thing where it's like, well, historically, the right of the wielder was a fight to the death.
Right. Yeah.
However,
yeah, we're in more civilized times now.
Yes, it is to a yield, right? But it is not unheard of for the duel to get carried off, right? Like for someone to go beyond, or for two combatants in it to demand the traditional like honor.
Sure.
Something like that. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I don't think that we're expected to fight to the death, but it could happen.
Sure, to demand satisfaction.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I don't get another raise, right? Because we're limited at 2.
Yeah, we both raised twice. Once we have bought in and gone through the ante, made all of our raises, when all bids are final, it is time to call it and see who wins. First, both players announce their final bid. That means saying out loud everything that they bet in total for the scene and what it defined or destroyed. Then, both players decide which bid is the most meaningful. What makes a bid meaningful is highly subjective based on the scene, who is involved, and what is at stake. Generally, a bid is more meaningful the more it relates to the current conflict, to each player's stakes in the scene, and to what sets your pilots apart both from each other and their peers. If there is a tie here, which is to say, if neither of us can decide which bid is the most meaningful, if we still believe in good faith that our final bids are equal, we can make a tiebreaker. The first player who decides to cross off something on their data file that they defined during this auction and destroy it is the winner. Coming out on top when it's that close requires sacrifice, and you can never use that resource again. So do you want to do the final bid here? Do you want to read out your items and I'll read out mine?
Yeah, so I've selected a piece of utility equipment as a kinetic repulsor, kind of duelist buckler here, to fend off like melee attacks. I have a unique customization being a heavyweight force multiplier. We've talked about that as being like a kind of like thruster unit attached to all of these like articulate points. And I've also selected a mentor in the form of Calithiel Ket, who's a justiciar of the Concordat, though native Feldspar.
And for my final bid, I have bid a standard weapon loadout, which is the Caesura's traditional longsword and hand cannon. I have bid a rank, which is that I am the class prefect of the Feldspar War College. And I have also bid a mentor, but my mentor I'm bidding is the Concordat Paladin Abaddon Spare, a proctor of the War College and a powerful thaumaturge from the Expeditionary Legion on Feldspar. And so we say, collectively we decide which bid is the most meaningful. which is obviously a very subjective thing. Do you have a gut answer here about which one you think is more meaningful?
Yeah, I think Hyacinth's bid is more meaningful here because as best boy, like you are in center stage. This is like a huge moment. Your mentor is here. You are like defending prefect, right? Like
Yeah.
I think that Rhodes is here, but that this means something different for Hyacinth.
I think I agree with you here. I do think that Hyacinth has a bit more stake in this fight at this moment in time, right? Privilege of winning means something to him in a way that it maybe doesn't mean that same thing to Rhodes.
Mm-hmm.
And so, once we have our winner, the player who placed the winning bid gets to decide how the scene plays out, how it ends, and who walks away with the prize. You get to decide what happened to who, including where and why and how they did it. You have near total power over the course of this scene. This is a big responsibility, but you are not all powerful either. You have some limitations on what goes down, and those limitations are the bids. When you win the auction, it's your job to work each of those bids into the scene. And like I said before, this where I got this is each bid must be used, each bid must be present, and it must be present exactly as it was defined. It says if a player bids their unique customization and defines it as unmatched speed, the scene should show them outrunning everyone on either side. If they bid their signature maneuver, the pilot performs it in the scene, whether it's the character's first time or the 50th time. And then once we have played through the scene, which we'll do in a second, we claim our reward. Once every bid is accounted for, the winner gets one last bonus before ending the scene. They get to cause harm or seize resources, depending on what they want most right here, right now. And these are the only way to enter something onto your data file of your own creation. You don't have to fill in a blank here. Causing harm lets you place a destroyed bid onto your opponent's data file, and seizing resources lets you place a defined bid onto either player's data file. But it doesn't have to be something that was already kind of previously defined. You can kind of freestyle it here a little bit. So shall we play the scene?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what this scene looks like. This is a very different kind of game than Beam Saber, obviously, which is a little bit more traditional in terms of it's a game that has rolls and dice results, right? And this we're moving in a much more narrative mode here, so we can kind of zoom in as we please. But let's I think opening shot here, we've talked about Feldspar. I think you described it as being somewhat jungle-like in terms of biome, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's mountainous regions and low-lying. In my mind, anyway, I was imagining pine trees and granite, and I imagine loamy soil, foothills of the Adirondacks or something.
Okay.
But temperate jungles are very real too. The Cascades and the Olympic moss forests and stuff that is very heavily rainforest. But
regardless, I think it's a planet with synthetic life, and I think my image is starting on a shot of a heron or something, right? Standing kind of in a pool of water, and of course, as our camera looks at it, we realize there's something slightly off here in that this heron is synthetic. It's mechanical, right? You know what I mean?
Forgot for a second.
This gleaming chrome beak or something, right? Dipping down into the water and maybe snapping up, some kind of wriggling, scaled of segmented, metallic kind of fish. And then I imagine, the bird taking off in a kind of a startled flurry as a massive, ceramic white foot comes down into the ground next to it. And we zoom out to see the Caesura piloted by Hyacinth Corren, making its way through this kind of I imagine there's kind of a clearing in a forested area, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we can kind of
that's cool. I like it, like a meadow, right? Just an area where this forest opens up.
Yeah.
Cool.
Maybe a big sweeping camera move that pulls out and pans to show us the kind of expanse of this meadow, this high grass. We haven't really talked about whether all plant life is synthetic on Feldspar or not either, or if there's some mixture of it. I like the idea that some of these trees are
I think you could barely tell, right?
Yeah.
You'd have to be looking for it, but I imagine even down to a cellular level or something. These are inorganic compounds, putting themselves together.
Well, speaking of cellular, I was thinking about those huge pine trees that are actually cell towers.
Oh yeah, that's a good
right?
example.
It's like one of those. What if one of those just popped up naturally?
There's a lot to chew on there.
But I think we get this sweeping wide shot of like kind of this meadow, this setting, and I think we also get like the aerial platform that we can see, penitents of the reliquary at computer screens, these like robed figures collecting, like you said, the battlefield telemetry. Maybe this is maybe here's a through line from the Diadem Royale, which we just finished, to this moment, right? Which is that this was like a battle royale. And so in this sweeping wide shot, over this vast expansive meadow and some of the wooded area around it, we can see dotted little patches of smoke rising from places where the other competitors have been knocked out over the course of today's like competition, right? You know what I mean?
This is like boss level, final stage. Like maybe this is actually like 3/4 of the way up a mountain or something. Like the like battle royale plays out over the ascent.
Oh, we're climbing to the top for like
Yeah, so like here at this meadow is a clearing at the tree line, and it's almost like a plateau. So you can like probably see the valley stretching out in front, the platform overlooking.
Okay, so this is like the shot we're getting is the Caesura with Hyacinth like ascending to the top, right? And like striding away from like on the ascent upwards, like the last straggler that Hyacinth had to fight on the way up, right? Another like wrecked Caesura. And I think, as Hyacinth kind of comes up over the top into the meadow, maybe it's Hyacinth over the radio, right? Rhodes, I know that it's just you left. Come out. Let's finish this honorably. As, he strides with the Caesura forth into this kind of meadow. And again, cut from like the Caesura to like the watchers on this platform. I imagine, right, like just for contrast, we get Calathiel Ket and Abaddon both standing next to each other, right?
Right. They're like shoulder to shoulder looking over a computer screen or something.
Yeah, and I think, Calathiel, right, like this, like the synthetic person, this Feldspari, who wears, I imagine, a uniform that somehow bridges the two cultures, right, is wearing like a Feldspari uniform, but like has a the 7-spoked wheel has been added to it on the epaulets or something. Whereas like next to him, standing there, Abaddon Spare is in full Concordat regalia, like these indigo tunics with this like large golden wheel, like emblazoned on like kind of like an armored breastplate, and maybe like there's a touch here. There's like a hint of something to come years down the line, right? Like Abaddon has like an amulet, right, or like a locket that has this pendant holding this swirling sort of quicksilver that we will see again 250 years down the line, or some hint of it.
I mean, I'd also just like add a little color on here. Calathiel doesn't get to wear the full regalia.
Yeah,
right. Like his station reflects the highest kind of like status that he can attain, right? Yeah, I like that. I mean, I think whatever from the short band, like come out. I don't think Rhodes responds immediately, but I think shortly after, camera on this clearing or something, I think that's like a beat passes, and I think this stanza like kind of drops down from like some cliff up above, right? And I think like kind of like lands heavily in front. I think this is, again, I'm like drawing on the force multiplier thing here. Like I think this is like a jump jet, like kind of thrown from a cliff, landing heavily, Rhodes dropping down. Who else? Your station has favored you today. Perhaps the odds will as well.
And I think this is probably right, like the beginning of a combat. Like it's probably kind of an ugly fight in some ways. In that I think right, there's a clearing. I think there's not a lot of coverage. There's not a lot of like fancy like trickery or maneuvering here. I imagine I get this image. I think of the Caesura like marching forward across the field with this heavy hand cannon like leveled in front of it, and just kind of like firing these like huge concussive shots over and over again. Some of them I imagine deflected by this like a kinetic repulsor at first. Others just glancing off armor, and the ones that don't hit, just like tearing furrows in the earth where they strike the ground instead of one of the frames.
I think adding a little into this, I like the idea of like there's no cover. There's like no room to maneuver. This is like like a sumo circle, or like I'm thinking of like late 1800s like duel, right? Like they're like in a ground here, and I think that this kind of like hand cannon, like kind of dodge cat and mouse game here plays out for like a minute or two, and whether that's coming off of the kinetic repulsor or whatever. I think I like the idea of marching forward, but I was imagining in my head like these two eventually were like circling, right? Like kind of I'm imagining like close but not close enough in striking range, and kind of doing the like walk down.
The tip of the longsword dragging on the ground behind the caesura, right? Like held in one hand, but like so that the tip of the blade is just carving like a trench that a man could hide in, right? That's the
Yeah.
difference in scale here, right? Just digging this like
good.
perfect circle in the earth as we are circling each other. And I think higher up this cliff, like this mountain, right? Like you said it before, as like a Street Fighter stage. I do like the idea that like, directly above us is the platform hovering. They're looking down on us, but then set back, out of the line of fire, but like as a visible reminder of what this is about, is the redshift on the hill.
It's literally half unearthed, or like it is.
Oh, damn. This is, yes.
Kind of like 3/4. It is half in the stone, like an Egyptian, like Valley of the Kings, like monument. Like, yeah, I like that we're like fighting like beneath it.
There's this like circling, like, right, like two wild cats, and then in an instant, right, it changes, like whipping forward with the sword. It is Hyacinth moving in. I imagine it hitting this buckler, this repulsor.
Ka-thunk.
Yeah, right. And like a flurry of blows back and forth. This is like some Gundam shit, right? Of course, like we're like the line goes up while we're talking again. And I think it's Hyacinth, like after his first flurry has been successfully defended, what does this mean to you, Rhodes? What do you want this for? The head of the mech looks off for just a moment to the side to look at the redshift. What does that mean to you?
You haven't earned it. And I think like with that, probably like a shoulder charge or something, right? Like kind of barreling down to like kind of strike off balance or something.
And we get, the interior shot of Hyacinth being caught off guard. Yeah, right? Like getting hit, getting knocked back. And then we get, the smile on Calathiel Ket's face, right? As Rhodes kind of takes the upper hand for a minute in this fight.
And so I guess zooming out for a second, you won the bid. So worth repeating in the rules, the winning bid gets to decide how the scene plays out, how it ends, and who walks away with the prize.
Yeah, I think I know. And I think I would pitch this on you because this does involve your character's history.
Yep.
But I think this goes back and forth a little bit, right? And I think maybe there's like the way this fight starts going is that Rhodes starts winning, right? It starts tearing down like the Hyacinth Caesura, like hit by hit, right? Coming in with like blows, augmented by this force multiplier that like tear off some of the armor plating of the Caesura.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I didn't think about this until just now, but coming in, I didn't declare any weapons. And so I think it's like, when the like stanza arrives into this battlefield, like the kind of like whatever standard weapon loadout is already broken. Like the first scene we get is like throwing aside some like short circuiting like beam weapon or whatever. And I'm imagining like essentially at this point, the force multiplier is my weapon, right? Like this is like blows, heavy-handed blows on this thing.
And so I think the way that this starts playing out in my head is that we get to a point where it's over, or it should be over. The Caesura is approaching like a point critical, right? Like the arm that was holding like the revolver, right? Destroyed by a blow, like bare wiring exposed, the hand unable to hold like the weapon anymore, the hand cannon left on the ground. So like one-handedly kind of wildly swinging this longsword, but Hyacinth not giving up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, the look of excitement that was on Calathiel's face turning to kind of like a kind of grim realization. And in the kind of like the mirror here, Abaddon Spare, Hyacinth's mentor, starting to smile as he realizes that like Hyacinth is not going to stop fighting. Like he will let this become a fight to the death, like in the old ways, like in the old tradition of the Concordat. His dedication to winning the Redshift puts him at a point where like and I don't know if we get this of Rhodes asking him to beg off, maybe.
No, I was gonna say I got it. Like I think whatever. Like if this hand cannon arm is like broken, we get some scene with Hyacinth like driving forward with that longsword, like like reckless blows, like all of the kind of reactor power into this machine. And I think at some point Rhodes and the stanza like catch the blade, right? Like of this like heavy steel longsword, and it's like with this force multiplier like pushing it back towards him, and I think is like at the neck of the Caesura, right? And is like, yield, Hyacinth, don't make a fool of yourself. And I think this is like very like Gundam anime, like the machines are straining and creaking.
Yeah, right. There's like fluid bursting from one of like the like broken tubings on like the neck of the Caesura, right? That has been nicked by the blade already.
We're going on like 45 minutes of this. Like it is just like not pretty at this point.
The machines are torn apart, like the area around them is shattered with the carnage of like what the pieces that have been chewed off.
I mean, I think the same is true of the stanza, like beaten here.
I think both these machines like barely functioning at this point. We get like the interior shot of Hyacinth in the cockpit, straining to push the machine forward. And, he says like, you don't understand, Rhodes. It was built for me. It's what I was meant to do. It's the whole reason that we're here. If I don't have it, what reason is there to go on? And it's driving the mech forward like a little further, like pressing the blade so it's pressing against both of them at this point, right? Like starting to bite into both the Caesura and the stanza.
Are you so desperate to become the edge of the blade which will cut your own throat?
Yes, and another push forward.
Yeah, and maybe that's like the point where it topples the other way or something.
I think there's maybe a moment here, I don't know if this is right for you or not. I think it's like a moment where Rhodes could win, but the only way to win would be to kill Hyacinth.
And I think Calathiel probably cuts in, right? Yeah. Like at that point, remember your station, Rhodes. You're duty bound.
I don't think Rhodes would kill Hyacinth here. Well, when we know he doesn't. Right?
Absolutely not. Yeah.
And so it's like that moment of hesitation or that decision not to carry out the killing blow that gives Hyacinth the edge to push forward and like strike a disabling blow, or just push the blade the other way enough to disable the stanza.
Yeah, I think it cuts through it, right? Like is this kind of moment, and it's probably a very triumphant moment for Hyacinth, right? Like I think this like longsword is like buried through the shoulder of the stanza, probably maybe blacking a couple of the screens like in the cockpit, right? Like you can even see the edge of it or something. Maybe Hyacinth too chose not to kill. But either way, like I think bested here.
Yeah. And I think maybe there's a shot after this of, like one arm ripped off of this mech, right? The sword, like hanging limply against the ground. But the Caesura facing the half unearthed redshift and like the cockpit opening up, so that Hyacinth can like look out directly at his prize.
And just for like one more callback to the Diadem Royale, I think like the honorary thing here, right, is like both pilots dismount. And I think Rhodes approaches Hyacinth to like grab forearms, right? Like in this kind of, whatever. It's like a mutual sign of respect, but we see that mirrored in the Royale where like that's the first thing Rhodes reached for.
Oh yeah, of course, yes. The arms clasped. And that is, I think, that scene, right?
That's act one. That was cool.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it. This game's fucking good. We haven't played in like 2-3 years, but it's fun.
We played this once a very long time ago. I'm glad to get back to it. Cool. And so then I get to claim my reward. Once every bid is accounted for, the winner gets one last bonus before ending the scene. They get to cause harm or seize resources, depending on what they want most right here, right now. These are the only way to enter something onto a data file of your own creation, not already printed there for you.
Is this where you get a title?
Ooh, maybe that is what it is.
Like you're canonized.
Yeah, maybe that is,
Yeah, I
'cause
mean you won the right of the wielder, right? So like by Concordat custom, you're presumably like moving up the kind of societal ranks, right? Like in this like deeply like caste based system.
yeah, maybe that is it. Maybe that's because the only other thing I had in mind here was like causing harm in some way, like something to do with like Rhodes's relationship to Feldspar, or like his like destroying his, there's like something about like some kind of like bond being destroyed between Rhodes and Feldspar, Rhodes and the people of Feldspar or something.
I think it's like that Hyacinth has ranked up.
Yeah, I think that
Like
makes
so
sense
that,
too.
you
Yeah.
know, thinks that you Rhodes is an underling now, like is lesser.
You know what I'll say here? The resource that I see is a like a fundamental apprenticeship, right? There's Abaddon Spare, this paladin who is the paladin of the reflecting pool, sees something in Hyacinth's performance here today that, when Hyacinth goes back to the quarters that night, Abaddon Spare is waiting there. And maybe the night afterwards, Hyacinth doesn't sleep in the War College dormitories anymore. He is brought to a different place in the War College. And all of this prelude to the fact that we know, maybe this is like seeing how Hyacinth has been changed by the time here or something, right? But like, we know that not soon after this, Rhodes is going to steal the Red Shift. He's going to leave Feldspar. And so maybe it's seeing his old friend driven to a point where he's almost willing to like either kill himself or kill the people he loves to in service of these invaders. Like maybe that's the moment that gets Rhodes thinking about what he has to do. But I think what Hyacinth has won here is an apprenticeship.
Yeah. And it's funny because like Beam Saber is so narrative forward and this game is very like action front.
Yeah.
That I'm like something like, okay, what's the downtime from this? But like I think there's probably some like evening after a celebration. I think it's not just the people on the platform. They're probably like people who've been climbing the mountain, right? Like watch this, like the other younger students or something. There's probably like some evening there where Rhodes thinks that in the bar afterwards, like that Hyacinth is going to be there. We'll clasp arms as old friends, congratulate one another. The moment that we exit kind of the Concordat like sphere of influence, we're back to how we were, and it's not like that. Right? Like Hyacinth is like speaking down to him as if he were one of them.
He's giving lectures about like
oh yeah, he's giving us fucking sermon, right? Like about like what compelled his ability here.
Oh, and he steals the same phrase, right? The thing that you said to him, right? He says it again back here, right? It's like we will be the edge of the blade. Like he's he's taken what you've said so like not as like an insult or in any way, but in fact like a motivational like factor. Like we will become the tip of the spear. We are destined to pierce the veil and find our way to the builder, and it is like in these machines that we will lead the vanguard there.
I'm annoyed.
And so that is scene 1. That is how we do a scene in Last Shooting.
I saw you almost say Beam Saber.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. That was really good. Scene 2. Some time has passed, but for some reason that one battle sticks out in your mind above all others. Maybe you'll meet again. Answer these background questions for your pilot, and then set the scene together, and then follow the special instructions for the Scene 2 auction. These questions: how would your life be worse if your faction won the war? It's a fucking good question.
Yeah. I think I have an easier time answering that, maybe.
I think I have an answer too. Why don't you go first? You won.
Trying to think how to narrow this down, right? The Concordat is an entire society dedicated to like a singular mission, and it is one predicated on like an eventual reward and getting to that reward at all costs, right? And so it's one that sees entire worlds subjugated for the sole purpose of producing machinery and food for the endless crusade, right? It is conquest. It is, the destruction of entire worlds under the belief that will get the Concordat closer to finding the builder.
I could give you almost the same answer verbatim from like a different perspective, which is exactly what I was cooking on. Which is like, how would my life be worse if the ring won the war? There would never be peace as long as the Concordat exists, right? Like, but in the eventuality that it did cease to exist, Rhodes would be only a weapon in like a society that values everything but that. Right? Like, if the ring were to win the war, Rhodes would be reduced to a tool of the oppressor, right? Like valuable in a moment, but in context, only an abstraction of what created conflict in the first place. So there's really no going back, right? Like Rhodes is like at this moment, maybe not at this moment exactly, but like in the greater conflict is a weapon in a pacifist society.
Yeah. What has life in the war shown you that you would never have seen without it?
I'm sure you have some exciting answers for that one.
Gosh, from Hyacinth's perspective, right? I mean, it is.
And to pause, I guess when we're answering these questions, are we answering from 250 years in the future?
I think we're answering from
player characters,
from the moment of the scene, right? Because these are background questions for the scene, right? And so I guess we can, in the same way that we kind of set up scene 1 before we answer these questions, I think we can talk a little bit. Scene 2 is a reunion, your first encounter with the other pilot since that fateful first encounter. Feel free to use one of these suggestions to set the scene for the second encounter, or come up with your own, and then it gives you some suggestions. So we can talk about that, but I imagine that the second scene for me, I was imagining like 50 years later, or like 60 years later, right? Rhodes is going to steal the Redshift. He's going to escape Feldspar, and something, something about that escape and what happens in the aftermath leads to eventually Feldspar being destroyed. But I kind of think it's interesting, instead of like doing the next scene being like that, I kind of like the idea of like what happened to like 50 years after this, right? Rhodes is in the ring, this is like, we talk a lot about Rhodes being a folk hero of the ring, right? Like this kind of like bandit hero. I kind of like the idea of jumping to that moment. And it's genuinely decades until Hyacinth and Rhodes meet again after Feldspar. So, yeah, what has life in the war shown you that you would have never seen without it? I think the easy answer here, right, for Hyacinth is that it is like the mysteries of the fundament. The Concordat is so much more like deeply enfranchised with knowledge about the workings of the fundament and how to manipulate it and its miracles. They possess so many ancient machines that utilize it in ways that like no modern device can replicate, right? They have reliquaries just full of these things, these little miracle makers, and they have techniques for summoning and controlling and manipulating the fundament that are lost or are for just not available anywhere else in the galactic network. And as like an apprentice of a paladin, as like a member of like the kind of like inner workings of the Concordat in this intervening time period, Hyacinth gets to see all of this, right? He gets to see the miracles of the builder, right? He gets to
exactly what I was going to say, right? Like you've seen,
right? He gets to touch the bones of the saints.
Yeah.
And so what does he get? He gets a deep affirmation of his burgeoning faith.
Legend, fairy tale, like folklore, proven, right? Like the sort of things that were written in the Old Testament are real.
Yeah,
I like that. That's pretty cool. I mean, I'd probably sign up.
Right? Like, what if they brought you to see the Shroud of Turin, but it was also like a functioning invisibility cloak, right? Like,
right. For Rhodes, what has life in the war shown you that you never would have seen without? Cruelty, lies, deception, subjugation, erasure, worlds wiped out, genocide, right? Like the kind of like loss of cultures across multiple star systems, subjugation into a cohesive whole that even its constituent parts never signed up to be a part of.
Mm-hmm.
I think like the loss of individuality and richness that comes with that, not in a libertarian like sense,
yeah.
But like I think what you see is flattening, right? Like what it looks like to flatten culture across multiple star systems.
So yeah, the third question here: does your pilot respect the other player's pilot? My answer is easy. No. I imagine in the aftermath of Rhodes stealing the thing that Hyacinth saw as his purpose in life, he has in fact lost a lot of respect for him.
My answer is also easy, and I'm going to say yes. Because I think that Rhodes can, like, still see what Hyacinth is capable of. Like, that belief, that commitment, like, the ability as a pilot. Like, there's something kind of, like, undeniable there, even if Hyacinth can't see it in return. They're similar.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me. So then we set the scene. Scene 2 is a reunion, your first encounter with the other pilot since that fateful first encounter. Feel free to use one of these suggestions, or come up with your own. And they suggest assault on a significant base, first firing of a new superweapon, or a meeting between fleets that have prepared for the day. We can kind of talk about where is this, but I think in my head, we're definitely jumping forward in time. Like,
let's go higher on that number too. Like, I guess I'm leaning towards a couple decades.
Yeah, at least a decade. I could even like 2 decades, like 20 years, right? This is, like I said, I want to see back in the Lowtower, we got a stack of Sem Bellwether pulp novels about Rhodes' adventure as like a folk hero of the revolution. And I think that this is like maybe like that time period or early in that time period of like the events that inspired a lot of those novels, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're obviously not going to cover, the nature of this game is such that we're not going to cover like, how does Rhodes get recruited in the ring? How does he first start out? Right? We can talk about that a little bit if we want to or not. But like, I definitely think this is like at the point where Rhodes is now fighting for the ring.
Some clear kind of leaps here. Rhodes stole the redshift out from under the Concordat's nose, fled Feldspar. It's been a decade plus. Both factions have increasingly militarized into open conflict. I like the idea of the pulp novels. I mean, off the dome, the stuff I've written down. It's the raid on the Anar shipyards, liberation of Ursius Minor, the shuttering of the Boros Expanse, the hijacking of the Edgeshine fleet, the Millennium Prestige heist, to name a few.
I kind of like the shipyards one, like a raid on like a shipyard or somewhere, like maybe like what if it's like a place where an expeditionary fleet is being outfitted?
Totally. The notes that I have for that were that aided by the Persei Shipbreakers Union, a ring-led action to steal the Anar Fleet Systems flotilla still under construction, which, we can adapt that, right? Like,
Yeah.
And also no detail for that. That's just stuff I thought sounded cool.
Yeah.
But I like the idea that like a union inside of this shipyard is like trying to, essentially like seize control. Maybe they're building like a Concordat fleet, like under contract or something. And
yeah, right. It's like an independent system that the Concordat has like set roots in, and like kind of conscripted its industry towards this like like outfitting an expeditionary fleet, like an expeditionary fleet that has like not settled in a system but has docked in a system to like receive repairs and maybe outfit itself with new ships, almost like holding the system hostage while it's there.
Well, yeah, and in my mind anyway, the idea I had for a shipyard was that like it is like an artificial ring on this planet, right? Like that. So when an expeditionary fleet is like docked for refitting, it's in effect a blockade.
Oh, that's great. Yes, yeah. That's fun. Okay, and so this is like a raid on these shipyards to disrupt this fleet and like steal away some of their like newly constructed ships or something. That's kind of the vibe.
Yeah, like I'm kind of thinking Rhodes is leading like a faction of the ring to like break this blockade in like a section of the like shipyard ring, so that those in this like ring allied like shipyard union can like make away with what they've managed to like get a hold of, and is kind of covering ground for as long as it takes.
Yeah. Okay. But lo and behold, someone unexpected is accompanying this expeditionary legion. That's a good one. I like that. So yeah, with that, is there any more scene setting we need to do there? I think that's pretty good, right?
No, that's pretty cool, I think.
So this might end up being more of like a space battle.
Maybe I'm also imagining like what's like a good parallel to this of like this is like there's surface to stand on, but we're in like low gravity, like low orbit. The image in my head is like one of these levels I was really stuck on in like Star Fox for N64, where there's like a fucked up like debris field.
I was thinking about it's called Kessler syndrome, is the theoretical scenario in which Earth's orbit is overpopulated with objects and debris.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because like whatever they don't use in the like if there's a shipbreakers union, they're like parts of these ships are kind of just like floating. Like I like that. That's cool.
Like abandoned hulks kind of floating. I also imagine, kind of like tethered platforms, like emitting like low gravitational fields, so that like these like shipbreaker mechs are like crawling on the surface of them and like cutting and tearing apart or like building.
That's cool. And you can't land a ship on the planet. Like there's too much debris, right? So like it happens in this like orbit. That's cool. I like that. Kessler syndrome. I didn't know about that.
Yeah. So we might put so much trash up there that we just can't send anything up anymore. Chill.
Look up Starlink.
Okay. So we move into the auction for scene 2. The player who won the Scene 1 auction, these are the custom rules for Scene 2. The player who won the Scene 1 auction may raise a maximum of 2 times. The player who lost may raise a maximum of 3 times. And no one may place more than 1 bid to destroy. So we can destroy our already defined bids now. And so, we go through the same process as before. First, there's the buy-in. So we both have to pick our first bid that we're going to define. So the thing I am going to buy in with is I'm going to, because I think we're going to actually see, this is not a training mech this time. This is actually the previously alluded to Weight of Ascension. And I am going to introduce my signature weapon, my first signature weapon. Signature weapon 1 is fundamental field generators. So I think that the Weight of Ascension, we can talk about exactly what it looks like more as we get into it. But I think that one thing it has, I think it is a somewhat humanoid shaped mech. And I think it has, how would I describe this? It's almost like it is wearing like a big cape or a cloak, but the cloak itself is like these hard panels, right, that I think can kind of like pull back and open out and like splay out as wings. But there's these like big slabs of like these big ceramic panels that when they are like brought forward and closed around, looks like this machine is wearing a cloak or something. But I think that these are fundamental field generators. And so I think there's a little bit of like wiggle room exactly about what that means. But I imagine that a lot of the way that the Weight of Ascension does its fighting is like I think it propels itself telekinetically. I think it is also like moving things in the environment, right? These field generators are, creating like force fields that protect it, and it's also using them offensively, and it's using them to like move or manipulate things in the environment.
That is cool.
Kind of a deeply ethereal kind of way of fighting. And so that is my buy-in. That's what I'm buying in with. The first glimpse of the Weight of Ascension.
I'm going to buy in with squad mates. I think from like, Ring Central Command, this is an aggressive de-escalation pursuit attaché. I think kind of collectively, I'm just going to go for Company of the Boar.
Hell yeah.
But I think this is a squad of maybe like 4 in total, kind of like Ring counteroffensive units. Rhodes isn't here alone.
Yeah. Is this like Rhodes' like ride or die right now? Like, is this like the group that Rhodes is like kind of known for fighting with in this moment in time?
Yes, this is like Rhodes kind of like merry men here at the moment, right? Like these are kind of like fellow, I don't know, like daredevil pilots, right? Like these are kind of like the Ring's forward guard, right? Like these are like the people in the front line.
That's probably like a thing, worth emphasizing too, right? Is like on this scale, the Ring is not, even in our current like historical moment, big air quotes about that in the game, right? The Ring has rarely ever been a force that is like fielding like standing armies or, like large scale troop movements in the same way that Concordat does or that the Commonwealth can, right? I think it is like, like pirates and like these kind of like like little like advanced like counteroffensive units that are like
Yeah.
guerrilla strikes, sabotage. It is very much not about like sending people into the meat grinder, because the ring doesn't have the hardware or like the personnel to like fight that way.
Yeah, and I think they don't call it that, right? Like I still really like aggressive de-escalation attaché. Like they're here to not win a war.
Yeah.
They're, like counteroffensive quarterbacks.
I imagine, like writing about these people that is not done by Sembel, whether writing from like sources outside of the ring, would probably call you pirates before they would call you soldiers. There's like a real difference in definition there. And so, yeah, that is our buy-in. So after that, we have the ante we get to raise. I think since you lost, you can probably raise first. You also have more raises, so I think that'll make sense, bouncing back and forth. But yeah, so you can, in scene 2, because you lost last time, you are allowed to raise a maximum of 3 times. I'm allowed to raise a maximum of 2 times, and neither of us may place more than 1 bid to destroy.
I'm going to pull a signature weapon here. This, of course, is the Redshift's signature particle lance, right? Like, this is part of what the Redshift can do. The Perpetual Core is like able to draw from like unstable fundamental energy to like rend capital F fundamental reality. So just putting the particle lance.
And my first raise. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm looking up like dumb sci-fi words here because I have an idea, but I want it to sound good.
If I could show you the tabs I have open.
So I think this is going to go into my sensors / tactical suite, which is like a chronometric response accelerator.
What does that mean?
That is a great question. What does that mean? So I think that the weight of ascension is, maybe like a kind of again, we're kind of echoing back and forth between Beam Saber, kind of like a pale imitation of the, what is it called that Rhodes has on the Redshift? The Rage engine. Right? It is, I think that the fundamental like machinery inside the weight of ascension is kind of constantly taking in all this data, and it is kind of like pre-selecting possible responses for the pilot to take and then offering them to the pilot on an almost an instinctual basis. And so it's like tying the senses directly into the machine sensors to give the fastest possible response time.
Okay.
And so this is like, the pilot of the weight of the ascension sometimes finds themselves like responding before they realize what they're doing in the machine.
Okay. So it's like almost like a precognitive drive.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. That's tight.
I think it's, but it's tied again to the fundament here, and in this way of like, I think the signals it's analyzing are not necessarily like just the physical like indicators on like what a machine is doing, but right, like the ripples and the fundament beneath, right? So that is my first raise.
Yeah, I'm gonna mirror it a little bit. I think for special ability, I'm going to kind of like pull from my Beam Saber quirks, and I'm gonna put Volatile Reactor. Which is essentially one of the things that like sets the Redshift apart, is that, the kind of like core that powers it is prone to like outburst. Not extremely stable, not extremely predictable, but kind of like irrefutably powerful.
Like drawing on like a deeper fundamental power than the usual.
Yeah,
maybe
I'll even just add like fundamentally volatile reactor.
I like that. I think I'm going to destroy. I'm going to make a bid to destroy the first one.
Don't you pick that mentor?
You know that I'm picking my mentor. Am I stealing your steez on that?
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing. That's okay.
That's fine. That's all right. I mean,
let me hear yours. Yeah.
Yeah, right. I'm going to bid to destroy Abaddon Spare, my mentor. And so, since this is our first bid to destroy, I'm going to read from that section real quick. In a scene following an auction where a bid is destroyed, that destruction must be included and must be decisive. You will be setting scenes in space battles, and you may presume there are always things getting wrecked, but destroyed bids are the explosions that the camera focuses on and that your duel pivots around. While the bidder determines what is destroyed, the winner of the scene has the narrative power to say how. A bid that destroys your support crew may lead to a scene where they die, or one where they abandon you. Either way, it's permanent. And so when I bid to destroy here, I don't necessarily destroy. I don't explain how yet, right? That is up to whoever wins this bid to like decide how that destruction happens. But that is in the mix now. I'm bidding that Abaddon Spare in one way or another. Somehow that mentorship that is destroyed in this scene. That leaves you have one more raise if you want to make it.
It feels funny to say I'm also picking my mentor, but I think thematically, like that's kind of the thing that makes the most sense. I kind of think for both of these characters is like we're like exiting like the world that was, right? Like so I'm going to bid to destroy my mentor as well. I don't have to give any context to that, right? We just figure it out in the game.
Whoever wins decides how these things are destroyed when they narrate the scene.
Cool.
All right, and then I think that makes for all of the bids, right?
Yeah.
So when all bids are final, it is time to call it and see who wins. First, both players announce their final bid. So again, we'll do that. We'll go through and read each of our bids from this scene, and then we will decide which is the most meaningful. I'll read mine first this time. I have bid a sensor/tactical suite, which is my chronometric response accelerator, a little like predictive engine. I've also bid a signature weapon, which is my fundamental field generators. And for my final bid, I have bid to destroy my mentor, Abaddon Spare.
For my bid, I put up a signature weapon, being the Redship's particle lance. I've bid in a special ability with the fundamental volatile reactor, and I've bid to destroy my former mentor, Calathil Ket.
In the company of the boar, right? Your squad mates?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, of course. How could I forget?
Yeah, you had one more mate.
Yeah, and the company of the boar. The kind of aggressive de-escalation attaché assigned from the ring to accompany Rhodes on this kind of like wildcat strike.
Mm-hmm. Now we look at the bids, we weigh them against each other, and we ask which is the most meaningful. Which again, a subjective decision.
Tough call.
I'm inclined to give it to to you and the Redshift in this case.
I think so too, and to put some like fictional weight behind it, I think that this is maybe the first time Rhodes has like had a command.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, has been like elected to lead this raid.
He's responsible for others.
Yeah, I like that. That's good. Yeah, and I think also there's more of a. This is all of these are indicative of more of a transformation that has happened in a way that like feels deeper than Hyacinth's, which is kind of like a growth along the same path he was already on.
Yeah. This is turning a leaf for sure.
I like that.
Okay, so if that's settled, then I win the scene. I'll decide how the scene plays out, how it ends, and who walks away with the prize.